Throughout the entire 21st century, only 3 rookies have ever recorded 3 straight games of at least 20 points and 2 blocks. Joel Embiid did it in December of 2016, Victor Wembanyama joined him in November of 2023, and Kel'el Ware just punched his ticket a couple nights ago against the Bucks. In a Miami Heat season that's been defined by turmoil, Ware has emerged as a potential Rookie of the Year favorite, with flashes of so much more. But just how good is he right now, and how good can he be in the future? The bulk of Ware's value comes on the defensive end, more specifically with the way he's able to protect the rim. His measurables are pretty ridiculous. He's a legit 7-footer, barefoot, and he's got an impressive 7'4" wingspan, so as long as he's in position, it's like Miami has a wall in front of the basket. With the height and length, he's also a really good leaper off of 2 feet who can get up and reach the ball in some pretty impressive spots. Not only does he get up high, he gets off the floor really quickly. On a play like this where he's off balance and in a back pedal, look at how quickly he's able to gather his footing and go vertical for a volleyball spike. And because he's able to get off the floor with little to no momentum, that also means he has a great second jump. So in the event that he gets caught on an up fake, he's often still in position to block the shot. The height, length, and verticality already give him such a high floor as a shot blocker. Then what really brings it together is how good he is at timing up these jumps. Offensive players really can't sneak the ball past him at any angle because he intentionally times up his jumps to swat these shots at their apex. And when everything I've talked about comes together, it gives him an absolutely absurd radius as a shot blocker. Take this play for example. He's under the basket in a zone and ends up completely in the restricted area while Reeves attempts a floater from about 10 feet out. It was called a goaltend, but not many players can make contact on that shot. Here's another example. DiVincenzo thinks he has a free runway to the rim in transition, and look at how far out Ware is when Dante takes off. That's some pretty remarkable ground coverage. I should also mention that plays like that are possible because of how good Ware is at tracking the ball with his hands. On this one, he's fronting Zubac in the post when Powell drives baseline. For him to spin towards the paint, recognize that Powell's going reverse, and perfectly target the ball is some really impressive stuff. And when I say track the ball, I mean with both hands. Here you're going to see him take off vertically with his right hand up. Collier adjusts his release angle in midair, so Ware does the same and swats it away with the left. The way he tracks the ball up until its release doesn't just help him block shots, it also helps him shut off potential passing angles, and that could mean in midair or on the floor. On this one, he steps up to Mathurin on a drive, then uses that off arm to deflect a dump off. Something you'll often see him do is extend one of those long arms to preemptively play a passing lane. And because he's so good at tracking the ball, he's able to completely erase certain opportunities. Here's an example against Spain pick and roll. He jumps out to the perimeter in a hedge, and with Jimmy staying attached to Booker up top, Nurk's about to free up in the paint, only for Ware to stick up his left arm and send away the pass. His hands are freakishly quick for someone with that much size and length. And for a team like Miami, whose defense is built on shutting off passing lanes and racking up deflections, that's a match made in heaven. Because Ware just started getting serious minutes, I think it's important to adjust his numbers. And if we look at a per 36-minute scale, he's averaging 2 deflections. That might not sound like a ton, but for a paint-oriented big, it's a pretty healthy mark, and similar to guys like Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, or Rudy Gobert. One advantage I'd say he has over all 3 of those players though is the way he's able to strip ball handlers. You'll see a lot of plays where someone's going right at him in a back pedal and he just targets the ball with those sharp hands to force a turnover. But he's still figuring out when and when not to take these risks because against players with a bit more craft, he does tend to get his hands stuck in the cookie jar, picking up some avoidable fouls. However, I'll take the good with the bad. He's averaging over 1 steal every 75 possessions, which is enough to put him in the top 20 among all centers. Of course, that pales in comparison to his shot blocking. He's also averaging nearly 2.5 blocks per 75, good for the 95th percentile in the league. I actually think the most impressive part is the combination of both. It's rare to see a big who can both block shots and make plays on the ball in passing or handling situations. This season, there are only 3 players who match or exceed both of Ware's marks in steals and blocks per possession with at least 400 minutes played. Those players are Goga Bitadze, Jonathan Isaac, and Victor Wembanyama. I want to take it back a few steps to the rim protection though. There's no doubt that this is his best quality as a defender and probably as a player. So for the Heat, the primary focus of their defensive scheme is to keep him as close to the basket as possible. That could mean using him as a low man where he can make reads from the baseline to tag potential threats and play cleanup. And when he's operating as a sort of free safety like this, it's important to not just acknowledge how many shots he blocks, but how many he deters. I'm also a pretty big fan of his activity and overall movement patterns behind the play. He's always quick to recognize threats and get in position while not overcommitting to the paint and giving up easy looks from the corner. He also has a good understanding of Miami's scheme. They're a very shift-heavy defense, meaning they'll often put 2 on the ball, then have the corner man rotate up to the wing. It's his job to rotate from the paint to that shooter in the corner, and rarely ever will you see him mess up that rotation. Another staple of Miami's defense is of course the 2-3 zone, and with a presence like Ware in the middle, that's just brought to an entirely different level. Like I said, he deters a lot of shots around the basket, and if he's camped underneath in that zone, ball handlers are often forced to live on a diet of tougher looks. Just watch him on this possession. First, he gets in position to pick up connect on a cut, then he steps outside of the paint to reset the 3-second clock before committing to Hayes in the middle. The Lakers still don't have an advantage, so Hayes comes up to screen for the ball while Ware stays on that block. LeBron drives, Ware parks himself in the middle of the paint, and there's no space to attack, so the result is a tough fadeaway jumper. Because Miami's goal as a defense is to keep Ware as close to the basket as possible, that means the goal for a lot of offenses is to find ways to pull him outside of the paint. One way they'll do that is by running offense through their bigs, especially if it's a guy who can face up and shoot. I'd say Ware has some trouble with 2 different archetypes. The first are those massive post-up players, as Ware doesn't have the sturdiest frame in the world. The second are those bigs who are almost hybrid wings. Ware isn't super fast, and he really struggles getting around screens, so they can often lose him in off-ball action. With that said, when it comes to straight up isolation defense, if a big can't overpower him, he does an incredible job of holding his own. This especially stood out against the Spurs when the Heat finally committed to the Twin Tower look. Bam and Ware would switch every action involving Wemby, and both did about as well as you can ask for. Maybe Ware's most impressive man-to-man performance came against Şengün and the Rockets though, and this is where his unique physical tools really stood out. He may not be the quickest guy in the world, but he does move his feet well enough to cut off drives, and he's good at bracing his body to absorb contact. From there, his length takes care of the rest. Isolations against Ware really are few and far between though. For most teams, the way they attempt to pull him out of the paint is with the use of ball screens. The thing is, more times than not, he's completely camped out, which can cause some different issues. He basically only plays drop defense, and it's a really deep drop, so certain offensive players can give him trouble. Anthony Simons is one who had a field day against the Heat a few nights ago, just stepping into pull-up threes time and time again. However, against most offensive players, it's perfectly okay to give up the pull-up jumper, and sometimes it's even encouraged. Like against DeJounte Murray, for example. He's a playmaker and a slasher, so anytime you can make him settle for that shot is a huge win. But then you have a guy like Fred VanVleet who's actively hunting for the pull-up 3, and it's in those situations where it'd probably be in his best interest to get up a little bit higher. For me, Ware's development will be all about finding that right balance. when not to get up to the level of the screen in a high drop, and for a rookie, I'd say he's already pretty advanced. One thing that really jumped out to me when watching his defensive film is that the roller quite literally never gets behind him. And to be honest, I don't think he's given up a single lob out of the pick and roll this entire season. That becomes even more impressive when you also consider the fact that he's often trying to bait the lob pass before dropping back to break it up. Because of the traits that make him a great shot blocker, like the length, verticality, and timing, he's able to play the ball while still being in position to take away that pass. And of course, in the event that he plays the ball, then that attacker decides to stick with a drive, he'll just stay attached and protect the rim. So, in totality, I actually think he's already a very good drop defender, and that's a really big deal. The whole premise of drop coverage is to keep the pick and roll a 2-on-2. Because the roller never gets behind him, and he can play the ball, a third defender rarely ever has to get involved. With drop, the advantage for the offense is the 2-on-1 that the initial screen creates. But if the big is great at handling 2-on-1s, it really isn't that big of an advantage. And in the case of Ware, I think he's already put together more than a few high-level possessions of taking away both the ball and the roll simultaneously. So what ends up happening is that ball handlers really can't get deep in the paint against him. They're almost forced to settle for the pull-up jumper, and a lot of times that means low percentage long twos. If they try to force the issue on a drive anyways, knowing that he's primarily focused on not giving up the roll, that's when he's back to blocking shots. In drop coverage, I'd say there are really only 3 flaws I'd point out. The first I already talked about, and that's the way he can sometimes be a bit too paint-bound, giving up quality jumpers. The second is that he sometimes has a tendency to overcommit to blocking shots. So when he doesn't make contact, he'll find himself out of position. The third comes back to the lack of speed I mentioned. Against screeners who like to pop out to the three-point line, he can be a little slow getting out to contest. The Heat have tried to work around this tactically, and one thing they've been doing a lot is having Ware drop to play the ball, while the point of attack defender peel switches onto the big. The only potential problem with this is that in the event the offense resets after getting that switch onto Ware, now he's forced to defend in space, which is an area I've yet to draw a conclusion on. He's barely had to step out and defend on the perimeter at all in his short NBA career. And while I don't ever expect him to be a switch-heavy big, in the brief time we have seen, I'd say he's done a pretty good job of moving his feet and using his length to contest. After all, the flashes of some legitimately high-level defense are very much there. Such as this play against the Bucks where his man sets a go screen and he plays the ball in a drop before recovering to the perimeter in time to contest a 3. The tools are phenomenal, the instincts are great, the activity has been up to par, and not even 30 games into his career, I'd already say Kel'el Ware is a very good defensive player with serious all-defensive potential. As for the offense, his value is again built on those unique physical tools. Just like with the shot blocking, his combination of length, timing, and verticality gives him an absurd radius as a lob threat. As a result, they'll often put him on the baseline or in the dunker spot where he's able to space the floor vertically and finish plays. When he's in these spots, I think he does a really good job of moving without the ball to make himself a target. On this one, you're going to see him flash to the opposite block as soon as Jovic starts a drive so that he's available for the lob. And when you add high feel movement to those physical tools, you're also left with a guy who can create a lot of second chance opportunities on the glass, then put them back up for easy points. When it comes to how he operates down low, I'd say there are 2 things he can really improve on. The first is his use of the power dribble. In the event that he doesn't have an angle to just leave the floor and dunk, I'd love to see him create more space underneath the basket. The second is his sometimes questionable shot selection. He has a tendency to get tunnel vision, meaning if he has the ball down low, he's almost always looking to go up. That can lead to some bad shots, and I'd like to see him hunt for the kick-out pass a bit more. With that said, he often gets away with attempting these tougher shots in the paint, and that's because he has shockingly good touch. You could make the argument that this is his most important offensive skill. We see athletic bigs who can get above the rim all the time. Not many of them can score over or around perfect paint defense on floaters and hook shots. Take this play for example. He starts on the perimeter, and when he cuts to the paint, a rim protector is already in position to turn him away. The push shot is just such a nice tool. And that touch doesn't just show up inside the arc. Another standout skill that makes Ware unique is his ability to stretch the floor as an outside shooter. Now, he hasn't played many minutes, so we don't really have a sample size to work with when it comes to gauging exactly what caliber of shooter he is. But what we can see is that he's comfortable taking three-point shots at volume, even with contests, and defenses certainly respect him as a shooter. Those who don't find out the hard way that when he's spotting up, maybe trailing an early offense, or just holding the ball up top, if they don't step up, he will take and make that shot. What I'm looking for as his game progresses is whether or not he can build off of that shooting threat to open up other avenues. There have been some flashes of legitimate ball handling capability, and if he can attack closeouts consistently, we're talking about a pretty ridiculous offensive weapon. But for now, I'd say he's still a bit loose with his handle and can be indecisive at times, so this is all still projection. Due to those current on-ball limitations, Ware's role on offense for the time being is almost exclusive to finishing plays that others create. I really like the way they use him when he's sharing the floor with Bam. Of course, they want Bam in the primary action, so they'll have Ware spot up in the corner, where not only is he a threat to catch and shoot, he's a threat to operate along the baseline as an interior threat with a knack for diving into open space and catching lobs. With that said, because most of his minutes are played at the 5, he's usually the one in the primary action, where he's a pretty awesome pick and roll scorer. I already talked about his radius as a lob threat. That really stands out when he's playing in the two-man game. Miami's ball handlers know to throw the ball high, so you'll often see them make passes that only he can get to and finish. Just look at this one. Even Amen Thompson doesn't have enough vertical pop to get to this pass. Then when Ware comes down, he actually goes to that power dribble for 2 plus a foul. Of course, he also has that shooting threat, so if a defense overplays the lob, he can just as easily pop into open space for a high quality 3. The guys who typically run pick and roll for the Heat though are 3-point threats before anything else. So they're the type of players who often draw 2 to the ball and create 4-on-3 advantages, meaning a lot of Ware's touches come in the short roll. If he catches the ball with space to take off, the play might as well be done because there are very few weak side defenders who can get up and alter his shot. However, if the weak side help comes early and he doesn't have space, you'll see probably his biggest flaw, the lack of extra passing, often electing to try and score through traffic instead. Like I said, he can get away with some of these tougher shots down low because of how good of a finisher he is, but there are definitely scenarios where a pass is the better decision, and that's another thing I'm looking for as his game grows. The last thing I'm really focusing on is on a play like this, where he catches the ball in the short roll but his back is to the basket. The ability to punish mismatches in the post really could determine his ceiling as an offensive player. We've barely gotten the opportunity to see him post up. In the time we have seen though, a couple of things stand out to me. For one, it's obvious that he struggles to really establish or win position. He just doesn't have that type of frame, and his game pretty much hinges on scoring over the top. With that said, he has a good set of moves already, often looking to get to turnaround fades or jump hooks, and he has the touch to make it work. To me, a high-end projection for this aspect of Ware's game would be what you see with Miles Turner, sealing off post possession for quick scoring moves over the top and making it tough for defenses to switch smaller players onto you. So, if we look at his entire offensive game as it stands right now, I'd say he already excels as a lob threat, both in the dunker spot and out of pick and roll. He's already a very good interior finisher, and with the addition of a more consistent power dribble, as well as better shot selection, could be one of the best in the league. The three areas in which I think he could take a leap to that next level are as a decision maker, specifically on the perimeter, as a passer, specifically out of short roll or deep catch situations, and how he attacks mismatches in the low post. I don't ever expect him to develop into a primary creator, but his combination of size, athleticism, and touch is rare. So with the right tweaks and some development, he could be a massive off-ball weapon. If you pair that with the defense, you're left with a two-way talent who really does project to be a potential all-star and maybe the biggest steal of last year's NBA draft. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Ware. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.